Now we move to our last witness, Dr. Paul Stockton, Senior Research Scholar, Center for International Security and Cooperation, Stanford University. Have a seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to testify. It's clear that you've read our prepared testimony with great care. So I'm going to summarize my remarks very briefly and maximize the opportunity that you have to ask questions. I believe that the draft framework, as currently written, ignores and is likely to subvert the important changes that Congress enacted into law in the Post-Katrina Reform Act. I'm going to suggest this morning that Congress had compelling reasons to adopt those changes, and also suggest that departing from the law enacted by Congress puts the nation at risk of some of the same systemic failures that hobbled the federal response to Hurricane Katrina. I couldn't help but smile, Madam Chair, when you made reference earlier to the possibility of doing a side-by-side between the law and the draft National Response Framework, because as an Old Hill staffer, that's exactly what I did when I got my hands on a copy of the draft. I lined it up against the statutory provisions that you enacted into law, and here's what I came up with. The Act specifies that the FEMA administrator is, quote, the principal advisor to the President for all matters related to emergency management in the United States. The Act also specifies that the administrator of FEMA shall, and again I quote, lead the nation's efforts to prepare for, protect against, respond to, recover from, mitigate against the risks of natural disasters, acts of terrorism, and other man-made disasters. Very clear, and my written testimony provides the cites. The draft framework ignores these legislative grants of authority and assigns them to the Secretary of Homeland Security. The framework states that the Secretary, not the FEMA administrator, would be the principal advisor to the President for emergency management. The framework also specifies that, and here I quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security is the principal federal official for domestic incident management. By presidential directive and statutory authority, the Secretary is responsible for coordination of federal resources utilized in the prevention of, preparation for, response to, or near-term recovery from terrorist attacks, major disasters, and other emergencies. Madam Chair, the framework's departure from the division of authority that Congress specified in the Post-Katrina Reform Act creates a couple of problems. First of all, the framework will foster confusion over who is responsible for leading and coordinating federal assistance in a disaster operation. And confusion can have deadly consequences. Even more important is the second problem. The framework takes the emergency management system in the wrong direction and ignores lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina. Let me turn very briefly to why I believe that's the case. Studies of the response to Hurricane Katrina, including the House Select Committee's report, A Failure of Initiative, identified a number of underlying causes for the failed federal response to Hurricane Katrina. The House report noted that it does not appear that the President received adequate advice and counsel from a senior disaster professional. And a key reason for that, again, the report specifies that under the Homeland Security Act of 2002, the Secretary of Homeland Security is the department's top official for emergency management. The report noted that emergency management, and I quote, is just one of the Secretary's many responsibilities. According to the Secretary's testimony before the Select Committee, he's not a hurricane expert, nor does he have much emergency management experience. Madam Chair, I believe that it's likely that this situation will continue to exist in the future. The Secretary is going to be responsible for a vast array of responsibilities, including terrorism prevention, that extend beyond traditional emergency management. Secretary needs to be good at that. Occasionally, maybe we'll have an emergency manager as a secretary, but not always. So, in response to that thinking, that analysis by members of Congress, the Katrina Reform Act adopted two structural changes to strengthen the quality of advice to the President. It shifted the leadership of emergency management from the Secretary to the Administrator of FEMA. And second, as you noted earlier, Madam Chair, the Act mandates that the FEMA administrator will be an emergency management professional with, quote, a demonstrated ability in and knowledge of emergency management and Homeland Security. Madam Chair, I believe that Congress made a sound decision in enacting these changes. The nation needs a professional emergency manager to be in charge of the emergency management system. And that professional must have the authority needed to lead the assistance to states and localities when they require it. Any reversion to the previous DHS secretary-led system would be a step backwards and would reflect an unlearning of the lessons learned at such enormous cost in Hurricane Katrina. My written testimony provides supporting analysis for the arguments I've just presented and highlights some additional problems with the framework, particularly in the realm of catastrophic response. I'd welcome the opportunity to answer questions that you might have and want to thank you again for the opportunity to testify.